I have some short commentary as a response to Inmendham's response to my critique of EFILism. Here it goes.
I'm sure some sort of keywords will come up. I stopped listening as soon as he said, well, the EFILists say you have to kill everybody. No, that's not what they say. I mean, it's not that complicated. The idea is to stop procreation. It's like the hole in the dike kind of thing. Okay, there's cess being poured out of a giant cesspool, and you want to say, what's the easiest way to fix the problem? To scoop up the mess that's on the floor, or to just plug the hole? And so, yes, plugging the hole's a little complicated. I mean, stopping reproduction for all the sentient beings on Earth probably isn't going to happen in some sort of little benign way. But nothing happens in a little benign way. Evolution isn't at all benign. So, yes, you kind of have to use some evolution. And some evolution is sometimes things get exterminated by evolution, okay, by the process. In fact, more species have been annihilated than currently exist, and that's just a truth. And it's sad, but yeah, that's the way it'll have to probably happen. But obviously it doesn't have to happen that way for human beings. So, again, that's just more nonsense. And if you think animals are going to have some crisis because in a millisecond their life is going to end, well, you can make that argument that that's the worst fate possible for these little creatures. But no, that's the best fate possible. It literally is, of all the possibilities, they couldn't win any bigger than to be instantly killed by a nuclear explosion. That's about as big a win as you could possibly have.
Gary has at me when I say that EFILists claim you gotta kill everybody, then tries to set the record straight by saying that's not what they say. But after a few moments, he actually says that killing all animals by a nuclear explosion is the best thing that can happen to them. What was all that panting about then?
So again, do your little doom mongering and your little scare tactics, but they're only going to be effective on a moron. So that's all you're saying, right? I'll just trick the stupid people by using like murder words and stuff. Yeah, well, go ahead, trick the stupid people, all right? That'll be your strategy. My strategy is going to be honest, okay? And the honest truth is, yes, for the lower forms of life, the ones that are less articulate and less capable of having conversations about how it's not that big a deal not to have babies and that, condoms aren't taboo, yes, those creatures will have to be in some efficient manner euthanized.
Gary says I use some scare tactics that are gonna fool the stupid, whereas he's just being honest. But notice I said nothing different from Gary. We both noticed that EFILists want to kill everyone. Gary uses the word euthanize and thinks he's honest. I use mass killing and omnicide, and that somehow makes me dishonest? Funny how that works. Coming into existence is a negative for all sentient beings.
Oh, who cares whether it's all or five? You're deciding. You're going to make a victim. You're going to tell them, it's okay, I'm worth it. All right? So I've given you clear analogies, and you're just pretending they don't exist. You're saying you're going to go to the fun park, Disneyland. You have no evidence you're doing anything constructive. There's no wound in the universe you're healing. There's nothing you're fixing by existing. There's nothing, anything's going to happen. You're just going to satisfy a little heroin addiction you have. And, you'll go to Disney World and get a little boner and say, oh, I felt good for a while. And then you'll drive home. And you're going to do it by tying some other asshole, okay, to a rope and bouncing him down the highway and beating the shit out of him. Somebody else is going to pay the price for your little bit of fun. All right? The people in the mental institutions, the kids dying of leukemia, all the stuff that's going to happen as a consequence of this risk behavior you're defending.
Gary says that I'm deciding I'm gonna make a victim. No, I'm actually not. I am not making a pro-natalist argument. Does Gary even know what he's arguing against? Doesn't seem like it.
Right, yes, so it's risky behavior and you don't have a take risk with other people's welfare permit. Who gave you the permit? God, evolution, dirt, a worm? Yeah, no, you didn't get a qualified permit, one that I have to respect. That's certainly true.
Gary asks, who gave you the permit to risk someone else's welfare? Well, Gary, who gave you the permit to press the red button?
But it doesn't matter. The point, my argument is, okay, is that yes, it's about imposition, and it's about this point that there's nothing to be accomplished here but satisfy a heroin addiction that shouldn't exist in the first place. You don't cure it by feeding it, you stop it.
Gary says that his point is about imposition, and there's nothing to be accomplished here, other than to satisfy our addictions. You don't cure it by feeding it, you stop it, he says. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I'm simply not convinced as to the method of stopping it.
Yes, so what are the obligations of intelligence? Is that complicated? Oh, nothing else has. We do. What's the smartest person's responsibility in any circumstance? The plane is about to crash. Well, I guess you find the person on the plane, right? The pilot has this heart attack, whatever, and the co-pilot trips and kills himself getting into the chair. You just find the most competent person. You say, fix it. Okay, that's what you do. That's what intelligence does. Intelligence doesn't say, oh, let's just have a random, let's just pick somebody let's just numbers in a hat or some other kind of retarded method to decide who's going to fix the problem. So yes, with intelligence comes responsibility. Duh.
Gary asks, what are the obligations of intelligence? That's a good question. Gary says that the most intelligent should fix the problem. Okay, but can we trust that Gary is the most intelligent being and his solution is the best one or even a valid one?
Look, we could do it tomorrow, okay? It's theoretically possible. Nuclear bombs don't have any limit to how big a one you can make and how big a mess you can make. So if we started tomorrow saying, let's make the doomsday, let's make the earth splitter, we could get it done in 20 years. We don't have to change antinatalism policy at all. We don't have to say, oh, we have to make a whole bunch of billions and billions of people. Attrition would take care of it. So we got 7 billion people. You think you need 7 billion people to do this? No, you don't need 7 billion people. So this has nothing to do with in the short run we need to feed procreation. No, there's no supporting procreation. So just lie.
Gary says we can do it tomorrow. No, we can't. You need a lot of time to convince enough people. You need time to create your doomsday machine, etc. That's why you require people to procreate until this is done.
Oh, I mean, it's just so idiotic. He just sits there and spends whatever it is. How far are we into this video? 11 minutes pointing out exactly why it's perceived as negative. And then he says, why would an intelligence think there's anything to fix when something's negative? So I could make this simple analogy. There's a bunch of sewage pouring into your living room through a pipe, that has a valve on it. What do? Do you just live in the sewage or do you turn the pipe off? Duh. And he's saying, oh, I have some problem with figuring out why a human being would be compelled to fix a problem. Oh, I don't know I never met human beings that are ever compelled to fix problems. That humans never do that. They never try to satisfy a condition and improve a condition. They never spend any effort or money or anything on ever trying to be comfortable versus uncomfortable. Oh, too stupid.
And it's not clear how they can claim to know that people have an obligation to do anything, let alone pursue the type of solution they imagine.
Right. So he's just saying that, and he doesn't understand why an intelligence would understand a word like efficiency or fair or clean versus dirty, oiled versus broken, burn up. Why an intelligence would make a motor that could run for 10 hours rather than 10 seconds. He doesn't understand that. He's telling us honestly, oh, this is a complex argument. I can't understand why there would be any initiative or any incentive for a reasoning, sensible organism to figure out how to make knives and forks, to make it more efficient and cleaner to eat their food. Of course they would. You're fucking retarded.
Gary thinks I'm saying that there's nothing to fix. What I actually said is that I'm skeptical of the fix proposed by EFILists.
Okay, well, go ahead and disagree all you want, but you're not going to be able to show me how your happiness came from anything other than your addiction to the heroin. That your silly little fantasies of a romantic conquest or whatever the fuck you have as some sort of fantasy or fantasy is clearly just made out of an addiction created in your psychology or in your physiology. We're addicted to air, we're addicted to food, and we're addicted to some other superfluous nonsense that has something to do with making us feel like our dick is bigger or, we're great or we're wonderful, and that ego thing feeds us. And it's nothing but an addiction. It's a simple fucking addiction. So go ahead and make your rational argument that satisfying an addiction is intrinsically valuable. Well, it's not. I don't think by any reasoning can be shown to have any value whatsoever. You're just creating a mess and then cleaning up the mess and saying there's some victory in that. No. And again, if that's outside of any kind of notion that it requires hard deprivation for you to have any of those fantasies in the first place. I mean, there was a time I thought virtual reality would be a good idea, but then I thought about it and I said the only people that you can put in the virtual reality have to be people that need. It's only their needs, it's only their desperation, it's only their loneliness or their need for affirmation and all these other, this bullshit psychology that would keep them playing the game. And where do they get that psychology? Because most people have to earn it. You have to earn your hunger and your deprivation. You have to earn your appreciation. Your need has to be built out of, time in prison, so to speak. You don't appreciate the freedom unless you've been in the jail.
About pleasure having intrinsic value, Gary says that all pleasure comes from satisfying our addictions. What that does even matter? Pleasure is still a positive experience. Whether it comes from satisfying our needs or not, it changes nothing. Gary also thinks that we gain many positive experiences because we struggle to get them, and the struggle is bad. But again, this does not make the positive experience any less. And he didn't respond correctly to the surprise example.
And the same is true for life. There's just no good. There's just bad to be evaded. And that's it. There's no other function. There's stopping the whip. There's no carrots. And your delusion that there's a whole big pile of carrot, this little carrot paradise you're going to lead us to, or you think the human race is in now, is such a delusional, disgusting description of the reality.
Gary believes that I'm in favor of leading the humanity to a better place, a kind of utopia. I don't know why he believes that. I didn't say that in my video. I didn't say that in any of my videos.
It doesn't matter. The fact is, though, you have no right to impose the negative. You have no right to ever start whipping anyone. So if you can't guarantee it's carrots all the way down, you have no right to impose. You have no right to tell somebody else they have to pay for your profit. Fuck You.
Gary screams that I don't have a right to impose. Okay, chill. I'm not imposing anything on anyone.
Impossible to come up with some definition of harm unless you think, well, I should have been told. Why would telling you help? I had a bunch of things I wanted to get done. Well, is there any evidence you needed to get any of them done, or that any of them were going to fix anything? And clearly, there's nothing to fix once all the things that are broken are destroyed. You don't have to fix the clocks. The clocks have also been evaporated. So you can't say there's a bunch of broken clocks left behind. No, there's no broken clocks left behind. There's nothing for you to do. No pictures for you to paint. No walls to hang them on. Yeah, there's nothing you need to do. Everything was already done.
About the red button, Gary says that my plans are irrelevant and there's no evidence that I need to do what I want to do. He says that a minute after screaming that I have no right to impose. Interesting. It shouldn't matter whether I have something important to do or whether I just like to stare at the moon. I'd say Inmendham has no right to impose on me and choose for me.
So again, everyone, there's no rational reason that we have to kill anyone. So one word says antinatalism, clearly connecting it to the act of procreation. The other argument, and the EFIList argument, is clearly there's no practical way to, through democratic process and speaking our opinions, to persuade animals to use condoms, even if we could afford to make condoms in all these various sizes and shapes, which we can't. So there's only one practical solution, that is, one generation takes the hit. Just as the same exact thing is going to happen when the Earth blows up eventually. Those are scientific facts. The Earth isn't going to be eternal. It's not going to last forever. And someday every single living thing on the planet will have to be destroyed. So I'm not making anything new happen. I'm just accelerating when it happens. So again, you can't make an argument about the event because the event's inevitable, asshole.
Gary says that there's no reason we have to kill anyone, but then contradicts himself by saying that animals have to be killed. By everyone, I mean every sentient being, of course. Gary also says that the red button doesn't really create any new event because everyone ultimately dies and the Earth itself will be destroyed. Going by this logic, we could justify pillaging and burning the villages, because everyone eventually dies, and besides, a few billion years into the future, there won't be any life left on our planet. This is a reductio ad absurdum of Gary's thinking.
Well, it makes perfect sense to rational people. So I guess I would argue that that's why everybody ever fought a war or did anything else, is because, yes, the future needs not to be run by those assholes. That was basically the argument, that yes, the sacrifice now will be worth it in the future. Now, I'd argue that we haven't done much with all those dead bodies, in the sense that there's not much to be proud of in terms of the civilizations we've built out of those dead bodies. Is pretty sucky.
Gary says it would be perfectly fine to kill all people on an isolated island. I have to say that this is a perfectly consistent position. What's odd to me is that the EFILists I talked with say they wouldn't be fine with killing those islanders. So there are some important divisions in EFILism itself.
Well, so this is idiotic. So we already did solve the problem. Yes, it would solve the problem. You have some fantasy that life just poofs out of nowhere. I have scientific data that can demonstrate that it's a sequence of events that is so preposterously improbable, okay, that it's like rolling Yahtzee dice and having all the dice say 5 and they're all stacked on top of each other. It's an insane amount of improbable events. One-time events out of trillions and gazillions and bazillions and zillions of permutations. The whole fucking Earth is fucking covered in body parts, in DNA, in all the parts that make a DNA molecule, yet no other molecule, no other arrangement of the molecule, no subtle change to the molecule has done a single bit of evolving on Earth. Not in the deepest cave, not in the deepest ocean vent, not anywhere on this planet is it doing something else than what the first and only DNA molecule did.
Gary rambles on and on about how improbable life is. This is supposed to be a response to my saying that exterminating everyone on an isolated island would leave other beings intact.
I'm saying there's nothing we can do about the rest of the universe. So if you want to play this, oh, the Earth is just an island thing, well, yeah, that's the way it is. Even a drone technology, it just doesn't matter. There's no way of traversing the universe. Okay, by the time you get there, it doesn't exist, frankly. So you'll never be able to do much about anything in the rest of the universe. If there was such a possibility or probability anyway. There's just no evidence that this isn't anything but the most bizarrely rare event.
Once again, Gary says something about us not being able to do anything with some potential life in the universe, completely unrelated to anything I said. So
he's using the word morality, which again is just an absolute pile of shit rhetoric. That's one of the clearest things that if you're going to say, oh, there's no definition of EFILism, well, there is one out of my mouth. It certainly doesn't include any stupid, jerky little play with bullshit word morality in it. So just get to value ethics, shithead.
Gary is indignant at me for using the word morality. He seems to think that EFILism has nothing to do with morality. He's critically wrong. Gary often implies that people have some obligations or that they don't have the right to impose, or there is a bad and right thing to do. These are all moral concepts. Gary likes the term value ethics. Maybe he's not aware that morality and ethics are often used as synonyms.
He just said unjustifiable, so it clearly is justified. So that must have been a semantic error, a typo or something. It is reasonable. It is justifiable. There's nothing to say it's unjustifiable. That's true.
Gary thinks I made a typo by writing unjustifiable. Nope, I indeed meant unjustifiable, because all other EFILists I spoke with claimed that exterminating those on the isolated island would be unjustifiable. So this was my response to those EFILists' response to the problem of the isolated island. Of course, Gary has a different position, and my response doesn't apply.
Doesn't matter. Again, it has nothing to do with crimes of guilty or sacrificing or punishing or any of those things. So again, it's a lie. It has to do with protecting the future victims. They are a realistic probability. We're making them not a realistic probability. Okay, that's all that's taking place. Their voice is the one being heard. Their voice is the one being listened to. That's all it's about. The other voices, they have rights to their opinions. I'm just saying their opinions that I have a right to impose is not a useful opinion. It's not going to overwhelm the victim saying, fuck you, leave me alone. The right to deny is stronger than your right to impose.
And the innocent cannot be sacrificed for the greater good, whatever that would be.
Well, of course they can. It's perfectly rational. If you can kill one person to stop 1 million people from going through some horrible fate, it's perfectly rational. There's nothing irrational about it at all. It's perfectly rational economics. It's perfectly sensible. That's just the way it turned out. Sorry. I wish life was fair, but it's not. That's a fact. We're trying to make it less unfair, jackass. So you can't say, well, it's unfair to punish them. Well, it was unfair to punish the other jackasses who are going to be the probabilistic victims. So those probabilistic victims have more unfairness on their side. They have a bigger unfairness argument to make. So your little argument, I want my rights, doesn't mean anything when your rights mean you're going to be imposing or violating their rights, asshole. Your trespass is much larger than theirs. They didn't trespass on anything. They didn't violate anybody's rights. You violated theirs.
Gary says that omnicide is not about any sacrificing. Well, actually it is. Those who don't contribute to the perpetuation of the cycle of life are being sacrificed for the greater good. Then Gary switches to say that it's perfectly rational to sacrifice the few for the benefit of the many. He uses the word rational with some very unique meaning, it seems like. I would say that it's unjustifiable. Whether it's rational under Gary's definition or not is irrelevant. In ethics, we're often interested in finding out what's justifiable or morally good, not what's merely rational. At the end, Gary says I violated the rights of the future people, probably by bringing them into existence. That's not true, of course. I haven't violated the rights of the future people, nor do I plan to.
To you, it's perfectly intuitive to me. Imposition, yeah, I get it, sucks. Avoid it wherever possible. And if you can't avoid it in serious cases, well, then yes, you have to sacrifice your liberty. Your liberty doesn't overcome that basic liberty right to be left alone.
Gary says that tallying up the bads and the goods across individuals is intuitive for him. He says that virtually immediately after saying that EFILism is not based on negative utilitarianism. Gary's ignorance is showing.
Now, if you were saying, oh, we're going to torture one person to save a bunch of people, not to go to Disneyland, but to save people from being tortured, well then, yeah, the little cost to the present individual be accepted. The cost to one generation to prevent harms from billions of generations, yes, that's acceptable. If I can kill one cat today and prevent 453,000 kittens from being slaughtered tomorrow in some brutal way, run over, and in other ways starved and killed by attritions and all kinds of miseries, yeah, I'm doing it because I'm rational.
Gary says it would be accepted to torture one person to save more people. Accepted by who? Well, not by the tortured one. And who gives you the right to torture this innocent person? That's right, no one. Gary also says he would kill one cat to prevent 453,000 cats from terrible futures. Yes, we already know that because he's a negative utilitarian. It makes sense on this particular normative ethics, but he hasn't convinced me that this ethics is the correct one.
Alright, so you can't understand the difference between sacrifices that have to be made to save people from harm and sacrifices of being made to merely gratify superficial and trivial desires.
Gary thinks I don't understand the difference between making sacrifices to save someone and making sacrifices merely to satisfy our trivial desires. This is a gross misrepresentation. I've never claimed these things are the same.
And that in evolution, when we're going to talk about the bigger picture of the animal world, clearly the preponderance of these tightrope walkers fall into the daggers. They get eaten by the crocodile. They get bitten by the cobra. All of that shit happens over and over and over again. Their lives are short, miserable, and hard. And their death is brutal. That's the truth. And you're saying you're okay with that because some of them live and lay eggs, and that's good.
Gary again thinks I'm in favor of reproduction. That's strawmanning level master. I'll end with some concluding remarks. Gary seems to think that I'm in favor of the game of life, or that I'm a pro-natalist. Both assumptions are incorrect. Gary doesn't quite get what's the purpose of a critique. It's not to provide a better solution. Gary doesn't recognize that he's a negative utilitarian. Gary should be making arguments that the position of sacrificing the few for the benefit of the many is justifiable and a correct means of conduct, rather than merely stating this sentiment in various examples and analogies. Some EFILists would not destroy an isolated island, while Gary would. This is a contentious point. Seems like EFILism is not clear enough for EFILists themselves to know what it's on about. Calling others stupid doesn't make you smart. Thank you for your time.